Arnab Goswami on the debate at 10, powered by Green Lamb, Apollo 24/7 and Poco Mobiles.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Russian foreign minister concludes his India visit, the global focus is on India's foreign policy. Russia has lauded India's stand on the war, says New Delhi could play a critical role in mediation between Kiev and Moscow. Will we want to play a role, or will we want to be one step removed? Let's debate.
India has solidified a key place in the present multipolar world order.
And it's very important for the United Kingdom that we are improving our economic, our security and defence relationships, because we are living in a more unstable world. And that's why we are strengthening our work with India, who we see as an absolutely critical partner at this time. And we're discussing issues like cybersecurity, defence cooperation and increased economic cooperation, including the trade deal.
The US and Russia are facing off to put India in their corner.
Russia is now under Western sanctions, making trade with it very difficult. But then we have many European nations, including Germany and Hungary, that are not able to shut off its energy supplies that they purchase from Russia. Also, we have nations like China and Iran that are increasing the trade pact. So far as India is concerned, we have had the rupee-ruble route in existence between us and Russia since 2018, and which we might now use more often to ensure India's energy security.
Our Western colleagues would like to reduce any meaningful international issue to the crisis in Ukraine. You know our position. We do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation in the entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way.
You can see how the world's focus has been on India. The map behind me and on your screen right now, highlighted in red, are countries that have rushed to New Delhi to speak to India's leadership. Canada, America, UK, Germany, Austria, Greece, Oman, China, and today there's Russia. A big outreach. The world looking to the country which has become a key regional leader, a dominant player in the global order. You can see how from all of these countries, they want India in their corner. Fact is, India is a corner unto itself.
The Russian foreign minister, who is visiting India, spoke of the possibility of India playing the mediator.
India is an important and serious country, and if India is with its position of just and rational and a rational approach towards international problems, then it can support such process.
Calling out pressure tactics to stop India from buying Russian oil will not work, the External Affairs Minister said this.
When oil prices go up, I think it's natural for countries to go out into the market and look for what are good deals for their people. But I am pretty sure if we wait 2 or 3 months and actually look at who are the big buyers of Russian gas and oil, I suspect the list won't be very different from what it used to be, and I suspect we won't be in the top 10 on that list.
The fact is, every nation has a right to put its own self-interest before anything else. It's not the hectoring hegemonistic era of the Cold War for either side. India also is exercising its right to put India first in the larger framework of international rule of law.
India is astutely aware of the changing world order.
सेकंड वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद, द्वितीय विश्व युद्ध के बाद वैश्विक संबंधों का स्वरूप बदल गया। कोरोना के बाद भी पोस्ट कोरोना नए वर्ल्ड ऑर्डर की संभावना है। कोरोना के दौरान दुनिया ने भारत के प्रयासों को देखा भी है और सराहा भी है।
Lavrov's coming to New Delhi the same day that UK Foreign Secretary was also here, as also the NSAs of Germany and the Netherlands and the Deputy NSA of the United States, underscores the importance of India in the global power calculus. Of late, under Narendra Modi, we have carried our weight in diplomacy rather strongly. But then the Russia-Ukraine crisis shows that we can carry non-alignment also with elan.
India's role in the New World Order cannot be ignored. Let's debate.
It's very interesting that in the last few days itself, I mean, we've had the British Foreign Secretary first, then we've had the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Yang Yi, and now we have the Russian Foreign Minister. Then you had day before yesterday, you had America's Deputy National Security Advisor, and you had these string of visits, and sort of India is keeping a very poker face in these situations. I think it's good, Brahma. What do you think? I think it's great. We're keeping a very poker face in the middle of all this, not committing, not picking a side. But as I welcome into the program this evening, Professor Dr. Vladimir Firikin from Moscow, and Tatiana Kokoreva, Deputy Chief of Sputnik websites from Moscow, and Gleb Makarevich from Moscow. He's from the Russian Academy of Sciences, and Jeffrey Van Orden. He's joining us. He's a former leader of the Conservatives in the European Parliament from London, and Elizabeth Braw from the AEI, the American Enterprise Institute from London. Thank you all very much for joining us. Brahma, just very briefly to start the debate, are we truly neutral here, or have we picked a side? Are we truly neutral here, or have we picked a side?
No, India is neutral and independent in its foreign policy. India doesn't have a dog in the Ukraine war, and there's no reason for India to take sides. India is located in a troubled neighborhood with China's shadow looming large. India's challenge is to sustain good ties with the West while also ensuring that relations with its time-tested partner Russia continue. Because if you look at the solo fight that India has been waging to counter China's border aggression for the last 23 months, no Western leader has even uttered a word on the Chinese aggression against India. And yet the West unreasonably expects India to take sides, to be with the West against Russia. Of course, the relationship with the US and with the West economically is critical to India's economy. Large parts of India's economy are tied to the West. And the US is also very important for India's defense preparedness. But all said and done, Russia remains India's number one defense partner. So this with us or against us approach that seeks to compel India to make a choice between the US and Russia will only bring the blossoming Indo-American relationship under strain. It's totally unnecessary.
Yes, I agree. I just cannot understand why the Americans have been overreacting. Why have the British been overreacting? Why is the West feeling like India has sort of betrayed the West at this point of time? This is a completely irrational response I've been seeing. And can you throw some light on it, Mr. Van Orden, please, from London?
Well, I don't think this is a question of choosing between the United States and Russia. I think we understand fully the nature of the strategic relationship that India has with Russia. But this isn't about the US and Russia. This is about Russia invading an independent democratic country, the Ukraine. And India has enormous standing in the world. And that position is growing, in her stature is increasing enormously. India is also a great moral leader in the world, and we expect, therefore, or rather, should I say, we're disappointed that India hasn't shown some moral leadership in this whole conflict, where you have Russia now bombarding Ukrainian cities, killing thousands of people, and inflicting great harm for no good reason, except perhaps the ambitions of one man. If nothing else, India should perhaps condemn this. And India, of course, is a great democracy as well. And I think that's very important. And we should respect the democratic wishes of independent countries. And the Ukraine is an independent country and has very clearly expressed what its wishes are.
So presently, you're giving the moral argument. I'd like Tatiana to come in from Moscow on this, please, because there is, and the background of this entire conversation, Tatiana, is, at least in the last 5 days, or last 1 week, increasing amount of pressure being put on the government of India from both sides to take a position. And I've been, we've seen this only grow, and the expectations are high. I think the terrible part was when this very immature person, the US deputy NSA, spoke of consequences for countries like India, which was most unfortunate. But I mean, if you want Indian help, you must deal with India with respect first. But Tatiana, what do you make of this? What do you make of this situation on a day when your foreign minister is in New Delhi?
Oh, I have to agree with you, Arnab, because this is a great deal of disrespect. And I think that our foreign minister actually put it very bluntly, that we do respect India's neutrality. We do respect the fact that India is holding its own. It's a great country. It has to do this, for itself. And the fact that, it's still, this is a very, for me, very traditional kind of picture. You have a person from London still trying to teach right and wrong to a country that, has a great history of, having listened that right and wrong from London for quite some time. This is the beauty of the whole propaganda machine that was unleashed in this campaign. Every country, every sovereign state, there's no right and wrong. There is no black and white. And this whole debate saying that, look, you have to pick a side, that's what we're saying. We don't need anybody to take a side. What we're trying to tell the world, and what Moscow has been trying to tell the world, is that there are countries that have, every single country has a right to think for itself. Absolutely. There is no one right way for every state. And that's exactly what our Western colleagues are trying to say. There's always a right way, and that right way, for some reason, always aligns with Washington's decisions for obvious reasons. London's right way has always aligned with, Washington's decisions. But why should India's? India is an independent state. And we respect the fact that it has its own policy. And this is what the foreign minister has been saying about today, of all days. Might I remind you that India and Russia have had a long strategic relationship. We don't rush, to try to counter a visit from another state like our, British colleagues do. Rush in there to try and, influence the situation. This visit is just another proof of the fact that we're talking about respect, and we're talking about a multipolar world with countries actually having their own decisions, their own strategic interests, their own national security interests.
I also think, I would just say here, Mr. Van Orden, that I think the United Kingdom, if I may say with respect, should also start looking out for itself. After all, in the present economic situation, the United Kingdom desperately needs India to sign that free trade agreement, and it could be a bounty if a large country like India, which is going to be is the 6th largest economy in the world, were to have a great economic agreement with the UK. But the point I'm trying to make, Mr. Van Orden, is the global order has changed. I'm sorry, but the UK cannot afford to upset India. I'm just putting it very bluntly. And the most strident opposition, I feel that America and the UK begin to take. I mean, America has its own compulsions, but don't you think that it's become extremely necessary for Britain to have its own independent policies and not just follow like a satellite state of America?
No, come on, Arnab. You know that's not true. And we're very long-standing and very close friends of India. The connections between Britain and India are so intimate and so close. And your speaker there from Moscow, she said every country has the right to express itself. Well, the Ukraine has the right to express itself, and the Ukraine has clearly expressed itself. It doesn't want to be ruled by Moscow. And there was no excuse. There's no excuse for what's happened. And we're not expecting, as far as India and Russia are concerned, my view on this is simply that as a friend of Russia, India should say, stop this war, stop this conflict, take your troops out of the Ukraine.
Arnab, as a friend of the Great Britain, I think India very necessarily needs to say, you have 6 million households in fuel poverty in the UK.
It's got nothing to do with anything we're talking about.
You need Russian fuel, or anybody's fuel for that matter, and you have to stop acting like a 52nd state. The 51st state is Canada, we all know this. But the 52nd...
Come and compare the economic situation in the United Kingdom with many parts of Russia. That doesn't come into it. I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree there. So don't try and distract us. The fact is, Russia has invaded and started a war in the Ukraine. It hasn't gone well for Russia. She's had many, many casualties. Right? She's now having to rethink her strategy. The Russian people are totally unaware of what's going on in the Ukraine. And the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government do not want to be run by Russia. Simple as that. So let the Ukraine express herself democratically.
And exactly that. The Russian people don't want Ukraine to be run by Russia. The Russian people also don't want it to be run by Nazis. And that is a very important part of what we are standing against. The Ukraine has expressed itself. People have overthrown a democratically elected president. They've been killing people in the Donbass region for 8 years, calling it an anti-terror operation, thousands of dead. And please don't lecture me on the number of casualties, because you don't have the numbers either. I do. I'm a journalist. I actually read those numbers every single day.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about 10,000 Russian dead.
That's not true. You're quoting the numbers.
Let's go back to the subject.
Kiev.
Peter Kuznick is listening in here. We are coming in once again today. Okay. All right. Let there be a temporary ceasefire on that. Professor Vladimir Firkin, I want to come to you, Professor Firkin. People are very curious as to why, at this point of time, the Russian foreign minister is spending 2 full days in India. What is the purpose of his visit? What is he hoping to get, by investing this time at this point of time in India?
Thank you very much, Arnab, for giving me the floor. First of all, I would like to say a few words to disagree with our distinguished colleague from London, especially with his words that India has to choose between Russia and the West. I suppose that India has not to choose. India has in national interest of its own, and its foreign policy should be not Western or pro-Russian, it should be Indian one, as it is indeed. And the aim of Russian foreign minister visit to Delhi, first of all, has as goal, I suppose, I don't know, of course, the details, because only Mr. Lavrov could reply to your question in the full form. But as far as I understand, our minister wanted to thank his Indian counterpart for not joining the anti-Russian resolution on the 2nd of March in the United Nations, because thanks to India, the population of countries which did not join this anti-Russian resolution achieved 2/3 of the population of the globe. So all words about the isolation of Russia in the world arena are in vain. And that was the first aim, I suppose, of Mr. Lavrov. The second one, I suppose, only was to ask him for support in some financial affairs, because Russia and India are participants of the organization named BRICS, uniting Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And the aim of this organization is to reorganize the world economy financial system. And this crisis around the Ukraine once more showed that this financial system should be changed, because we cannot afford such a situation that we sell the oil and our money for this oil is stolen, as Mr. Lavrov said. So we have to get our money back. And as the trade with India is doing very well, and we have already some experience of paying for our goods mutually in our national currencies, it would be a good contribution to the forming that new world order in which India's interests could not and should not be ignored. Thank you, Arnab.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. Peter, you were amused there, but I'd like to go to Elizabeth first before I come to you. I saw Peter smiling there while those responses were coming, and I thought actually, Peter, you were agreeing with some of the points that were made from Moscow, I suspect, not in disagreement. A fact is, I think we've reached a point, Elizabeth, where we've got to start being very practical about the way this war is proceeding. And India is being practical. I think the world should start getting practical. Elizabeth, I don't think it's going to be possible to economically completely isolate Russia. It's not practical. You can punish Russia economically, but you cannot isolate Russia from the rest of the planet. And since that is the case, should we not enter into a more practical domain, rather irrational domain? You can't crush or demolish or destroy Russia, which is what the West wants to do, using this particular, this particular invasion as a reason for it. So why not start getting practical and take the approach that India has? Let's do business with Russia, make the Russians see sense, make the Russians realize that the human rights atrocities, the civilian suffering has to stop, that the invasion has to be called off at some point of time. But I don't think this whole business of completely isolating and putting Russia into a corner, making them a pariah state, making Russians feel that they cannot be economically linked to the rest of the world is going to work anymore.
Well, it's never completely possible to isolate a country from the rest of the world. Not even the Soviet Union was completely isolated from the rest of the world. But Arnab, with regards to India's position, I was thinking, as you were speaking, what would India expect from the rest of the world if it were invaded by one of its neighbors? I think India would expect the world to rise up in condemnation against such an invasion, and it would expect other countries not to say, "Oh, this is our interest in this particular case, and we are doing business with the invaders, so we can't really take a position." I think India would expect other countries to say, "What is the morally right thing to do in this situation and then act accordingly. And I think that's where we are all, the rest of the world, meaning countries not Russia or Ukraine, are having essentially a sort of a moment of moral. We have to take moral account of what's going on and not to reason about, what is the most advantageous position to take financially or diplomatically, and just say, what can we do to help end this war as quickly as possible? And I think that's what India would expect from the rest of the world if it were to be invaded by one of its neighbors.
Okay, I take your point. I'll just give a one-line response and then hand it over to Gleb Makarevich from Moscow, who can perhaps respond to the broader point that you're making. But one simple point I'd like to make, Elizabeth, that there is no comparison here. Your counter question doesn't really hold true or is not relevant at all, for the simple reason that India cannot ever allow its soil to be used for geostrategic or military experimentation by any bloc. There is no comparison. Are you trying to say that I think the mistake that the Ukrainians have made, and my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine, and I support them in this time of great tragedy. But the mistake that the Ukrainians have made is that they've allowed, especially since 2014, for their soil to be used for all kinds of geopolitical experimentation, while this carrot of NATO or a security guarantee has been given out to it by the West. And today, American media is reporting that America has made it clear it's not going to be a guarantee for the Ukraine. You basically, left them cold on your own. So there's no comparison. As far as India facing invasions or etc., or its territory being threatened, we are threatened on a daily basis by China. We fight with China. We had casualties. We gave them casualties. Where was the rest of the world when the Galwan incident took place, when we were in a direct conflict with China? You didn't even notice. Did they notice? Jitendra Oja, did they notice? Did the world notice when Indian soldiers were killed? When Indian soldiers were killed by the Chinese in Galwan on our line of actual control, did the rest of the world even lift a finger? It didn't. It didn't say a word. We fought for ourselves and we killed dozens of Chinese. We killed dozens of Chinese, and that's why we are arming ourselves. We do not expect the West to come and fight for us. Ukraine expected the West to fight for it, and the West has hung it out to dry.
Well, you can't expect that another country will come and fight for you, but you can expect other countries to condemn the invader and to put pressure on the invader and to put sanctions on the invader. And I think India can be rightly disappointed with the rest of the world.
So then tell me, Elizabeth, very curious to know what pressure, and I have Jitendra with me. He's been a joint secretary in the government Ministry of External Affairs, so he knows geopolitical strategist, and Brahma Chalani is also there. We'd be very curious to know what kind of condemnation and pressure you put on China when they tried to enter our soil in Galwan just a few months back, when we killed a lot of Chinese soldiers in turn. What pressure did the West put on China?
Not a single West.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Can anyone tell me? Can any of our friends from the Western Bloc tell me?
Yeah.
India is right to be disappointed if it doesn't get Western support. My point is that we in any given situation where another country is invaded, one country is invaded by another, we as the global community have a moral obligation to support the invaded country.
So first of all,
Arnab, can I join, please? Arnab, can I respond to her, please?
Coming in, Jitendra, 1 minute. Okay, who wants to come in? Jitendra wants to come in? Okay. Jitendra Oja wants to come in. Yes, Jitendra Oja, geopolitical expert from Delhi. Yes, please. Mr. Oja. Yes.
Look, Arnab, we are a very responsible country. We do not support war under any circumstances. But we have always said that it is in the best interest of United States of America also to avoid confrontation of this war with China, the war with Russia, because this is ultimately going to alter geopolitical equilibrium in this region, and it is going to have long-term consequences. We are very conscious of humanitarian consequences, isn't it, whatever is happening? And you are aware, government of India is doing its best to bring some kind of ceasefire, to bring an end to this war. This kind of provocation, this kind of idea that either you be with us or you are against us, I think they are doing huge harm harm to themselves, and they are doing huge harm to this region. So I think they should respect India's position. They should have trust in us. And ultimately, it is also a position of our credibility. Russia has been our friend. We do not support the kind of political system, whatever may be in Russia, but we do not interfere in their internal affairs. So I think West has to be more receptive. They have to be more pragmatic. At this point of time, our objective has to be to bring an end to this war. Even the way they have imposed these sanctions, Arnab, you are very much aware that they have exempted gas imports, oil and gas imports, which whole of Europe and West is having from Russia. So definitely you are also trying to promote your strategic interests at one level. At second level, you are trying to scuttle Russia, and you want to change this geopolitical equilibrium, which is neither in your interest nor in our interest. So we urge you to have a more pragmatic approach, be more considerate to people in Ukraine, people in Russia, people on your side as well. That's it I wanted to say, Arnab. Thank you.
Yeah, you see, the problem that I have out here, and Gleb and Peter haven't spoken, I'd like to go to them. The problem that I have, Peter and Gleb, is this whole good and bad thing, right and wrong, black and white, good and evil thing. You know, anyone who's against America, not agreeing with America or the West at the moment is part of a growing axis of evil. And evil has to be countered. You know, you're God Almighty and everybody else is Satan. This whole approach, Peter, this whole approach is hugely hypocritical and counterproductive. I think there must be a realization that while Russia, for example, has done more than necessary in terms of attacking civilians and targeting civilians, and it must be condemned for it in Ukraine. The whole idea of trying to, we will close away Russia, Russia will not exist, Putin must die, we will black them out, they will not deal with us, and all Russians are evil. That approach will not work. I'd like Gleb to come in. Gleb, how are you viewing this? Gleb, from the Russian Academy of Sciences from Moscow. Gleb. Russia, can you turn your audio on? I think, yeah, great. Okay, got you there.
Yeah, I just want to comment on some statements heard before. Indeed, clashes between India and China took place, and Western countries did nothing to help India to mediate that conflict. But it was Russia that tried to do something, and it was Russia that tried to mediate that conflict, and it's Russia that will be able to mediate that conflict and to diffuse it in future. Then I wanted to say that it's not of the West to tell you about moral accountability. It's not of the West to teach India how to act from moral perspective, because the Western countries try to imbue nations' elites with the mantras about democratic institutions, democratic processes, and then they give you nothing in exchange. I think that India nowadays must diffuse tensions with China, and probably in the near future we'll see some breakthroughs in Sino-Indian relations. I hope that Russia will contribute to the process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Peter, what's going on here? I think the way I look at it, Peter, please come into the debate with Brahma Chelani here. Peter, the world will need some countries to remain neutral. Some countries will have to remain neutral. In fact, I think, Peter, aggressively neutral. And there will have to be stability in Asia. The only country that can provide that balancing factor in Asia is India, Peter. So the more neutral India is, the more India plays its cards well, the more India interacts with both sides, all blocs, the better it is for America and the world. So I don't think, I think these small things like, are we buying gas? Are we doing rupee-ruble trade? Why is Lavrov coming to India? Why is Why is India in touch? Why is Prime Minister Modi in touch with Russian leaders? These are very minor issues in the larger scheme of things, don't you think?
I do think so. I agree with you, but there are two different issues, I think, that we're discussing. One is this invasion, which is illegal, immoral, with the potential to turn into World War III if we don't deal with this intelligently. And so in that sense, what I want to see India doing is putting as much pressure as they can on Putin and Lavrov to end this as quickly as possible. The other issue that seems to be getting discussed is the question of the world order. And a lot of countries who are opposed to this war in some way see that the United States is the hypocrisy. To hear the Americans and the Brits condemning this in such earth-shattering terms, the invaders of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, you look at the rest of the world, or much of the world, looks at the history of the last 20 years and says, well, who were these people to be such moral authorities? India is in a much better position because India was not involved in those wars and India has not taken sides. And so it's in a position to use its influence, its economic power, and its moral authority to negotiate, to help negotiate. I think the friends of Russia, like India and China, the best thing they could do would be to talk sense to Putin because Russia is being weakened, not strengthened by this invasion, and the world is being threatened. So I'm agreeing with much of what you're saying about what role India should play, and I don't agree with those who are trying to force India to side with the United States and Europe on this. But India, I would like to see play an even more aggressive and moral role in helping end this as quickly as possible.
This is where the famous...
That's very pragmatic. I do appreciate your position. Yes, Tatiana wants to say something to you.
This is the very famous US soft power when it comes in, when they say, look, don't align with the US, just do exactly what the US wants, talk some sense into Putin. So it's basically align with the US, but let's all make an impression that you're not aligning with the US. But you did bring up some really great points there, Peter. The fact that the US and the UK that did and will, for the foreseeable future, act as the US's proxy in Europe, have literally invaded the half of the Middle East on a whim, on false intelligence, overthrowing governments. The only reason that Assad is still in power is because Russia intervened, and you still managed to invade Syria against the will of the democratic president that did not consent to it because the US was fighting terrorism, because the US decided that it's very necessary somewhere where the Russian military is already operational, and it's really good, to say the least. This is the problem. This is essentially the problem with what's going on today. It's the US way or no way. And this is where Moscow has said, and I'm extremely personally happy that our allies like India, like China, are saying, each respectively in their own way, saying that, look, we have our national interests. There is no one right way. And it's definitely not the US way and not the UK way. With all due respect, the last country that should lecture India on how to do everything or anything is the UK. You've had your turn. You're out of there. And you should stay out and mind your own business.
If I may add one point, Tatiana, to what you've said there, we've been watching. At least my generation in India has been very closely watching how our foreign policy has changed over the years. We are the generation that came out of college from Indian universities after the economic reforms. And so we've seen things change. And yes, I must say that we were perhaps very aligned to the Soviet Union. And then we became unnecessarily too aligned to the Americans. And Brahma, you know, you'd remember we were positively embarrassed when a previous Indian Prime Minister told George Bush that the people of India love you. And we always asked Dr. Manmohan Singh, who gave you the right to say that the people of India love you? We were surprised and a bit horrified and embarrassed, in fact. Now what we are seeing is something completely different. We are seeing an India that is playing its cards. Truly. And can I give an example of this, Peter, to you? We have had 5 foreign ministers who visited New Delhi in the last week. The Prime Minister of India has not met the Chinese foreign minister. Wang Yi only met the National Security Advisor and the Indian foreign minister. He was not given an audience with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But the Russian foreign minister has had that meeting today. Brahma can tell you more about the significance of that. Brahma, don't you agree? That itself is a statement, you know, that India is choosing which cards are important at which point of time. Brahma, would you like to expand on that from our strategic perspective?
Well, I agree with you, but I think there are 2 larger concerns that I have. First is the single narrative dominating the discourse in the West. This is very unfortunate because despite the diversity of opinion in the West normally, you have a single narrative dominating discourse today in the West. And in that narrative,
yes,
the fight over Ukraine has been portrayed as a battle between democracies and autocracies. Nothing could be further from the truth. Zelensky's regime is no less autocratic than Putin's. And yet, the narrative being pushed by the West is that Ukraine is a democracy that has been invaded by an autocracy. Another thing that really strikes out is that punishing Russia for invading Ukraine has ceased to be a means to an end and has become an end in itself. This may explain why Biden has discarded some key principles of diplomacy, including avoiding insulting another country's head of state so as to preserve space for direct negotiations. Now, if you look at the way Biden has increasingly personalized the conflict by hurling a steady stream of insults at Putin. He has called him a butcher, a murderous dictator, a pure thug, a war criminal. And the use of aggressive language began long before the Ukraine war, Just weeks after Biden entered the White House, he called Putin a killer. By contrast, Biden has treated the Chinese President Xi Jinping with respect. Not a single insult has been hurled at Xi Jinping by Biden. That tells you a lot. But the unintended consequence of Biden's insults is to seriously constrain the space for the US and Russia to reach an understanding to rein in the conflict. Look at the irony. Even as Ukraine and Russia are negotiating, the US is nowhere in the picture because the overriding focus of Biden has been on punishing Russia instead of seeking to find a way to end the war. Biden is only slapping more and more sanctions on Russia. Just yesterday, he slapped more sanctions on Russia. This is, and this is the most dangerous moment that the world is facing since the end of the Cold War. And if I could just,
I agree. When this whole
Arnab, just let me give you one example of how normally the Americans, if you look at the American foreign policy, they have used sanctions primarily to bring weak, vulnerable states to heel. But when sanctions have been used against another major power, like against Imperial Japan from the late 1930s, that led to what? That provoked the attack on Pearl Harbor, leading to the Pacific War, and eventually to the nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So squeezing a major power with a raft of harsh sanctions is fraught with danger. And unfortunately today, the only thing that Biden has is sanctions against Russia. Yeah. So where is the space for India?
Which will not be effective, I have been saying. Which will not be effective. Yeah. Which will not be effective, Brahma. It has not been effective against Iran. Sanctions can only be a short-term deterrent. They do not finish a country, and the sooner the West realizes that, I think the better. Now, we are today, and by the way, your comment was completely right. I first used to think that Biden was competing with Boris Johnson, who very often has a foot-in-the-mouth disease, but I now am positively convinced that he's competing with Donald Trump. Truly, the way he's excessively, I don't know who's writing his speeches anymore. Back on a serious note today, tell me, I think it's important, and if this opportunity is lost, Dr. Firukin, I want to go to you in Moscow. Do you think this news about Ukrainian helicopters targeting to fuel depots, which has not been denied by Kiev, will provoke a more serious round of escalation by Russia?
Not at all, dear Arnab. I don't suppose that it will trigger any kind of escalation. It's a very sad incident, but it was a detail in the big picture of Russian-Ukrainian relationship now. Now we are concentrated on the prospects for further negotiations. As you know, 4 hours ago, the President Putin had telephone talk with President Erdogan, and they discussed the results achieved during the negotiations already. And Russia...
You're saying Putin is serious about the talks? 1 minute. You're saying, Elizabeth, you buy that? Elizabeth, you buy that? You think Putin is serious about the talks? Dr. Firukin seems to suggest that he is. He's very seriously engaged in the talks.
Arnab,
does it look to you that way, Elizabeth?
They discussed this prospect. I don't know whether these talks will be held.
If I may answer the question, none of us are inside Putin's head, so it's hard to tell what he's thinking. But to your previous point about sanctions, the point of sanction is not to finish a country or to force it to collapse. It's to force it to change whatever it is that's causing harm to the world. That's why North Korea is under sanctions. That's why South Africa was under sanctions back in the day, because it had a policy of apartheid that was causing a lot of harm to black South Africans. And so the point of sanctions against Russia is to force President Putin to rethink his war against Ukraine and to end it as soon as possible. And frankly, I don't see how any country could want to extend a war that is
I think there's got to be. I think there's got. I'm somehow begun to believe that the talks between Ukraine and Russia can never be successful. It's got to become a multilateral effort very soon. It cannot work. Russia does not want to be sitting with Ukraine. Russia wants to sit with the rest of the world. Russia has, in my view, it's got a geostrategic axe to grind. And that, Jitendra, cannot happen. It cannot happen by sitting across with Zelensky's representatives. What do you think, Jitendra? Briefly.
No, we are in a situation where both sides don't enjoy each other's trust. So here some degree of facilitation becomes very important, because both sides are indulging in some kind of provocative statements where no understanding can be reached. I would also like to add, Arnab, that in days to come, world will take India far more seriously, because despite changes in government, we have been seeing some kind of consistency in our approach to the world, in our foreign policy. You have seen during Trump era, the way US government backtracked from many side negotiations, whether it's TPP or even Iran. But here we have been seeing this kind of maturity, that whatever is our position is a very well thought out position. And that is why people, whether in the United States or in Russia or in China, they are going to take it more seriously. And this is why if India facilitates this kind of talks between Ukraine and Russia, this is going to be more effective.
I think India should. Yeah. I think India should, but it's for the world to ask. I think India has a significant position. I mean, as one of the largest economies, one of the largest trading partners, I think we are in a unique position because we are under pressure from both sides. I think we are in a unique position to intervene here because to some extent we have the trust of both sides, and I can't think of any other major country which can say that. So let's see where this goes. Let's see if this fight ends. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fascinating discussion from Moscow, Lviv, Kiev, Barcelona, Berlin, New Delhi and Moscow and London on the program this evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, for now, good night and goodbye.
In the global employability rankings by Times Higher Education UK, only the following 6 institutions from India are ranked amongst the top 230 in the world for having the most employable graduates. IIT Delhi, IISc Bangalore, IIT Bombay, IIM Ahmedabad, IIT Kharagpur and Amity University.
Clear number 1 for the 3rd consecutive week. Republic Bangla unseats ABP Ananda after 2 decades. Gap widens between Republic Bangla and ABP Ananda. More than 300% bigger than Z24. Republic Bangla, number 1 across all-time bans, number 1 across West Bengal. Republic Media Network, India's most loved network.
Russia apparently has removed 2 platoon commanders. The total losses that Russia has suffered is about 17,000 troops. Over 500 tanks of the Russian Federation has now been destroyed by the Ukrainian side. But having said that, a major movement that's basically taking place from this area called Trinistia, from there they are saying that there is an attempt that the Russians are now making to cut off the Ukrainians from the Black Sea region.
Smaller channels fall further. Republic market share zooms. An incredible 44.4% market share. No network has been as popular. Republic Media Network, India's most loved network.
We made it to the center region of the city of Mariupol, and the fighting is intense. And now we're getting evacuated by the DPR military. Right now we're evacuating center Mariupol with the DPR military. It's getting really hot. So we made it farther away from the Ukrainian positions. There's blown up buses in front of us. We're trying to make our way out now.
रिहायशी इलाका जहां पर लोग रहते थे, ये बिल्डिंग देखिए और अंदाजा लगाइए कितने भीषण धमाके हुए हैं। यहाँ गड्ढा हो चुका है, रॉकेट से हमला किया गया था और रॉकेट हमले के बाद ये जमीन धंस गई और यहाँ पर ये गहरा गड्ढा आपको नजर आ रहा होगा। यहाँ पर जहाँ पर सामान पड़ा हुआ है, लोगों के घरों का मलबा पड़ा हुआ है, शीशा पड़ा हुआ है। यूक्रेन इस समय तबाही की आग में जल रहा है। जिनको रूस ने अपने हमलों के जरिए तबाह कर दिया है, काला सियाह कर दिया है। उन्हीं में से एक रिहायशी इलाका जिसकी तस्वीरें आप देख रहे हैं। लगातार यहाँ पर मिसाइल अटैक हुई, रॉकेट अटैक हुई और उसके बाद से चारों तरफ सिर्फ और सिर्फ।
For the first time in its history, the BJP has reached the feat of having 100 members in Rajya Sabha after the party won one seat each in Assam, Tripura and Nagaland. In the recently held biennial polls for 13 Rajya Sabha seats across 6 states, the BJP lost its solitary seat from Punjab but gained one each from the 3 northeastern states and Himachal Pradesh, where all 5 outgoing members were from opposition parties.